We spoke yesterday at some length about the poster from Women's Aid and the Rape Crisis Centre. It features a prince and a princess, with the prince charming, so-called, essentially looking as though he was about to hit her, and it was a campaign to raise awareness of domestic abuse and other types of abuse in the home. And it's got mixed reaction as to its appropriateness or otherwise. But Chris joins us to talk about this and other types of things. Good morning to you, Chris.
Hello, Ryan.
Thanks for joining us. You heard us talking about this sort of thing yesterday.
Yeah, I did, yeah. I haven't actually seen the poster, but obviously I listened to the lady from Women's Aid talking about the issue yesterday, and it kind of, it brought a few things home that I kind of felt I needed to talk about,
Okay. So what went through your mind when you were listening to it?
Well, the thing is, I was convicted in the UK 20 years ago of domestic violence.
You were committing the violence?
Yes, I was committing the violence, yeah. It was the physical violence. There was none of the sexual side of things that were also mentioned in the programme yesterday, but that doesn't take away from the fact that it was wrong, But the one thing that came home to me, and it's something that I've read in the media over and over and over again, is while I totally agree that the primary thing is to keep the women and the children safe and away from harm's way. Certainly in my case and other people that I know about, that what happens is that very little gets done to the perpetrator other than meted out punishment. There's no form usually of any recommendations for therapies or behavioural, treatments. And I feel that's something that desperately needs to be done
as part of the process to take somebody out of. Okay, well, tell us a bit about yourself. You were 20 years ago. You were convicted. What were you doing at home?
At home, I was a young married man.
How old were you?
And I would have been 23 at the time.
And it was your wife that you were abusing at home.
Yeah.
What were you doing to her?
She could be. There's nothing small about the situation, but there's the verbal side of the abuse, which obviously, many of the victims will tell you that's as cutting as the physical side. But there would be the verbal side. Then there will be slaps, punches. Pretty much along those lines, really.
When at what point do you we'll just go back there now. I know I presume and hope you've changed your ways if it's possible, but if we go back to that time, at what point did you go from say having a verbal spat to raising your hand, shall we say?
Well, that's the interesting point, because I went through after the events. I went through 2 years of therapy and cognitive behaviour to recognise these points, and there just comes a point where, and I'm sure some of the victims of domestic violence will tell you there's different sets of behaviour, but they kind of know when it's coming, because sometimes there'll be something in your psyche, you'll just pick a fight and eventually it will lead to the violence. And other times it can be something that's said that just triggers you in the wrong way and you'll just lash out. There's kind of no thought process behind it. It's almost an instinctual thing that you then, if you do it and you go through therapy, you have to learn how not to do it, know when the triggers are, that you can then pay yourself back from that.
So there's no rhyme or reason to it in that sense. You just came home and
absolutely.
It couldn't, because I remember talking about this a couple of years ago, and a woman said that she'd been out with her friend for a few drinks. She came home, the husband was sitting on the couch. He said, "Do you want something to eat?" And she said, "No, I've eaten." And then he proceeded to beat her up, apropos of absolutely nothing.
It can be. It's exactly like that.
Okay. What part of you and your brain and your personality allows you to go from raising your hand to allowing the flesh of you to physically touch another person, particularly a woman in your case, in a way that's going to hurt her? How does that square in your mind at the time?
At the time, you at the time, there are two sides to your personality at the time. There's no doubt about it. At the time, the side that's perpetrating the crime, just you defend it as it was. You made me do it. You brought this on yourself, and then after you've calmed down, all of the sorrow and all of the remittance comes about, and I'll never do it again. And there's tears, and it's very difficult to say which one's the real you. At the time,
you're dealing with Jekyll and Hyde, is what you're saying.
Very much so. I mean, exactly. I mean, like I say,
But what I'm trying to get,
it's in there.
I've never spoken to somebody who's happy to admit that they've done what you've done. Okay, so it's not a normal occasion for me to talk to somebody like you. So what I'm trying to do is, and I'm glad you're on the air because it allows us to try and get inside the mind of somebody who does this. Okay, so with that in mind, I'm just trying to figure out when a woman is bent down, cowering in the kitchen, saying, "Please stop doing this to me." I'm trying to understand how you, as an articulate, intelligent, for all intents and purposes, man, can keep going. This is the part of this story that that upsets me greatly, and I'm trying to get a handle as to where you're coming from, if at all. There's no way of justifying, as well you know, but is there a way of trying to explain it to us and to women around the country who have been at the receiving end of this? Violence.
The only way I've ever been able to explain it was, again, after going through therapy for a couple of years and speaking to people, psychologists and therapists, who could look at my behaviour and tell me what I was doing and how I was doing.
So what's the answer to the question then? Why did you?
Well, there are lots of issues. I mean, there are. It's too easy to pin it on one particular one.
Let's have a look.
There are certain things, how you're brought up. It plays a certain part to a certain degree, but the major overriding issue is self-esteem and self-confidence issues, and what you're actually doing. I've been told, or I've been explained to me that the person in front of you is actually the inner you that you're meting out that punishment to. Okay, so
that's your psychological sort of explanation. That might give you a sort of moralistic get out of jail free card, if you like, to explain. Actually, I can psychoanalyze my way out of this because what we've talked about for the last 15 minutes is you. We haven't talked about her. I mean, she this woman against whom you perpetrated these crimes is almost a bit player in this, and yet she is the woman who needs to be protected, discussed, looked after. I mean, how was she in all of this, apart from being beaten up?
Well, I mean, the first time, as you can imagine, was just a major shock to her. Because obviously she was married to a guy that she loved and, was looking into the future, and this came out of nowhere to her and was just a major shock. But as is usual with a lot of, as is usual, I promised I would never do it again and believed that I might, but it came again and again and again. And she always told me that she could see the signs of when she knew it was going to happen. And she stayed with me. I mean, and looking back, I can't figure out why the hell she did.
What signs? Give me the signs.
She could tell she could tell I was agitated, and as I mentioned before, that I would come back from maybe a day out or work or whatever, and I would begin to pick a fight for no apparent reason. Yeah. Or there would be subjects that she felt, that she'd be apprehensive about talking about because she thought it might.
Had you ever laid a finger on her before you got married?
No.
No. Did you drink? No. Was drink an issue?
I have to say, occasionally.
Did you ever get beaten up in your own home as a kid or as a young man?
I had physical punishment for alleged wrongdoings as a child, yeah. Like
in school or at home?
At home.
Okay, and did you have kids together?
No.
How did you end up, how did it get to the point, because domestic violence is normally, we've talked about this a lot on the programme recently, where the woman feels the shame, even though she is clearly the victim and shouldn't, but that's for another day. How did it get to the point that you got convicted? It must have been pretty extra serious.
Well, I mean, what happened was that obviously I beat her to a point where she thought she had a broken bone, and she went to the hospital. And once she went to the hospital, and obviously the bruises was showing by that point, and obviously they x-rayed her for an alleged broken bone, and that's when the police were then called into the matter, because that's what the doctor's hands were sort of tied, you know. So
ultimately, it got reported. You went to court, and you were done for domestic abuse. What were you sentenced to?
I was sentenced to 12 months probation, 100 hours community service, and a small fine.
And what did you do, community service? What did that mean? Did you brush the streets, or did you?
Kind of, chopping wood for old people, sweeping the streets, building walls, repainting fences.
Okay, and how much was the fine?
I think it was about £150 sterling.
And did you ever see your wife again?
Yeah, we lived together. We continued to live together for a year after that.
Did you ever beat her up again?
Yes.
Crikey, what is wrong with you?
Well,
what was going on? I mean, you've got all. You see, the problem is, Chris, I'm trying to be really measured here, right? Because you're, it takes, we appreciate you coming on to tell the story, right? And yet, every time, I'm just trying to. If you did that to somebody I loved, I swear to God, I would personally call over and I would have broken both your legs. I'm not going to lie to you. Like, if it was my sister, my mother, my daughter, I'd be over to your house. I just wouldn't. I couldn't help myself.
Well, yeah,
I wouldn't let you out the door.
I totally understand that. I can totally understand that point of view. I totally do.
And I know that's violent, and I know it's wrong, but I think it's man to man.
I just totally understand that point of view. But I mean, sorry,
you go ahead. It's your call.
The reason, I mean, this was the thing. I mean, sort of, I had to visit the probation officer on a weekly basis as part of the terms of my conviction.
Yeah, but you were only going over to have a cup of coffee and then going home and beat her up again.
No, because that's where it changed.
Go on.
That's where it changed, because although the court hadn't made any stipulation towards me getting therapy, the probation officer turned around and he said, "You can't keep doing this." He said, "Or I'm just going to see you forever if you don't get locked up." And it was at that point that I took the first step and went to see my GP, who then was able to funnel me into the areas that I could get help and therapy to stop this behaviour.
Where's your wife now?
She lives in the UK.
Okay, did you separate or divorce? Or?
Yeah, we divorced a long time ago, yeah.
Why? Stupid question, but why?
Well, she stayed with me while I went through the first year of the therapy.
Yeah.
But then there were other issues with regards to our relationship that we just decided not to stay together. And obviously, I mean, in the back of her mind, there was probably always the domestic violence issue, which I can't argue against, but that wasn't the fundamental issue.
Have you ever slapped or punched a woman since you left your wife?
No.
Ever?
No.
Hand on heart?
Hand on heart, never.
And you live in Ireland now?
Yes, I do. Okay,
and do you have to fight the urge to slap or hit a woman as per those warning signs that you had before? Or, do you have to kind of deep breath now, Chris? I don't want to go back to that bad place. I mean, is it all about endeavouring to control the beast within?
Basically, when you go through the therapy, they give you the tools to control your anger. It's almost like, if you like, a traffic light system. You're sitting at green all the time, and if it goes to amber, you need to be aware that you need to pull it back to green because you don't want it to go to red.
Yeah. What would you say to a woman listening today who's waiting for her husband to come home and start to fight and beat her up tonight?
Get out.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Thanks for your time today.
Can I just say though?
Yeah.
I mean, this wasn't really the issue of why I came on really to talk about myself. The issue was that I think there needs to be a lot more dealings with getting the men who perpetrate this into behavioural therapy, rather than just, as they did in the UK to me, and as they do too frequently, is just metering out some kind of punishment and throwing us back out onto the street.
You're a very articulate man, and clearly an intelligent man in the sense that I can hear it in your voice. Do you talk to women who are victims of domestic violence, or men who perpetrate it? Are you involved?
I mean, I've got a current partner, and we've been together for a few years now. But before that, I had a long-term partner who her first husband had been domestically violent to her,
and she ended up with you.
She ended up with me, but the thing is, people are going to say that's kind of crazy.
No, but it's the new you. I
proved to her that that was the man I was then. I am not that man now. And.
The reason I'm making the point is that I think your story could be very valuable to other people in a bid to stop it happening all the time. I think people could do with hearing from you, groups, that is to say, people who are, trying to stop domestic violence. I think you'd be quite useful to them to say, yeah, I was the monster. I think you should consider it.
I don't disagree. The problem is, certainly from my point of view, when I was there, and I haven't seen any difference in the 20 years since, is there just wasn't that kind of group there for me to do that kind of thing to. Okay, perhaps for the women's side, but certainly not the men.
Did you ever?
If you can get a man to stand up and say it in the first place.
Yeah. Did you ever raise your hand against another man as a matter of interest?
No.
No. Okay. That's another question that was on my mind. Thank you, Chris.
No bother.
And we may talk again.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks for your time today. Okay, that's Chris. Bye-bye.